يعني فين انت حاسس ان بلدك فين؟ يعني انت او المنزل فين؟ يعني بيتك فين؟
بعد القرار ولا قبل القرار؟
الاثنين؟
والله بعد القرار، قبل القرار كنت أحس إن أمريكا هي البلد. بعد القرار مش عارف. الآن تايه، مش عارف البلد اليمن، بلد جيبوتي، بلد أمريكا، مش عارف. أنا المكان الذي أعيش فيه مع الفاميلي حقي، مع أسرتي، هو البلدي.
Najeeb al-Omari is caught between his two home countries. Yemen, a nation destroyed by war, and in the midst of what the UN calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And the United States, where Donald Trump's travel ban has now made it seemingly impossible to bring his family.
والله عايشين ومش عارفين إيش المستقبل. إيش الفرق بيني وبين أي مواطن أمريكي يحمل الجواز؟ وإيش الفرق؟
When we met Najeeb and his family, they'd been living in the East African nation of Djibouti, across the sea from Yemen, for almost 4 months. There hasn't been an American embassy in Yemen for over 3 years now because of the war. That means visa applicants, including American citizens like Najeeb, have had their cases assigned to foreign countries like Djibouti as they try to get their families away from the conflict.
ما هو الآن المشاكل هذا كلها من بعد الحرب. ما فيش الإمكانيات، ما فيش الطب، خلاص الطب انهار، البلاد انهارة، فهذه واحدة من مشاكل الحرب.
Najeeb's eldest daughter, 11-year-old Shaima, was born with cerebral palsy, making it more urgent for her to get adequate medical care, something that's become increasingly difficult in Yemen.
هذا أثر فيها الآن. شوف هذا ما كانت كده.
As the war escalated, Najeeb applied for visas for his family to join him in the US, where he works to support them, and where Shaima can get stable medical care. They applied well before Donald Trump became president and introduced the travel ban. Mass outcry and protests marked the initial chaotic rollout of the ban, which stopped the entry of nationals from a number of Muslim-majority countries, including Yemen. Released just a week after Trump took office, the order morphed through 3 versions while it was being challenged in court. So it wasn't until December that the full impact on families became clear, when the Supreme Court allowed the 3rd version of the ban to go into effect. A month and a half later, Najeeb and his family had their interview at the US Embassy here in Djibouti.
Describe what happened in the embassy here in the interview.
جاء القنصل تكلم معي، قال هذه البنت الصغيرة نجيب لها جواز، بنت الصغيرة.
Because she was born after Najeeb became a citizen, his youngest daughter, Lemia, could be issued a passport. But his wife and 2 other daughters needed visas.
قال أنت ملفك مكتمل تمام، بس في عندنا قرار منع.
And how did you feel when you got that?
أنا كلمت، حاولت أقنعه، قلت إحنا عندنا حالة مرضية، في استثناء. قال لا، في قرار رئاسي.
Can you show me the papers?
Yeah. هذه ورقة الرفض.
One of the changes in the latest version of the travel ban is the inclusion of one pathway to the US, a waiver that can be granted on a case-by-case basis if applicants meet 3 criteria.
لموافقة الإعفاء يجب على القنصل تحديد منع دخولك، ليس سوى مشقة لا داعي لها، وأن دخولك لا يشير إلى تهديد الأمن القومي أو الأمن العام للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، أو أن دخولك سيكون في مصلحة الوطنية. بس
طب أنت اترفضت ليه؟ يعني في هنا
مش عارف هذا.
الأمن القومي.
الأمن القومي طب إيه؟
تهدد الأمن القومي.
هل هذه بتهدد الأمن القومي؟ هذه تهدد الأمن القومي الأمريكي. هذه الطفلة معاقة.
Najeeb thought that given Shaima's condition and the fact that he's an American citizen, they would qualify for a waiver. With no appeals process, their one hope now would be at the Supreme Court, which was set to hear a challenge to the travel ban and rule whether to uphold it or not by the summer. Until then, their lives would remain in limbo.
والله يعني بحاول ان انا انتظر واذا ما فيش يمكن امشي لان المعيشه هنا مكلفه.
Living here cost him his savings, forcing him to rely on family and friends to get by. The question facing them now, can they bear the weight in Djibouti, or will they have to go back to Yemen?
So now that you've been refused, what's your plan?
والله ولا في حاجه، انا منتظر يعني يمكن بالمحكمه يساعدونا او لانه قد في قضيه بالمحكمه نحاول انه يمكن يساعدونا لانه الحاله صعبه ورجوع اليمن اصعب. انا لو ارجع اليمن يمكن افقدها يعني.
The war in Yemen shows no signs of slowing, as northern rebels continue to fight with a coalition led by Saudi Arabia and supported by the United States. Now in its fourth year, the conflict has destroyed much of the country's infrastructure, leading to widespread disease and famine, and over 22 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. It's this that so many Yemenis are trying to escape as they try to reunite with their families in the US. Instead, hundreds have been stranded between their two homes, stuck in a foreign country. We went to meet with a group of applicants who'd been in Djibouti for months, many of whom had already received waiver rejections under the ban.
Who here has US citizenship? Yeah, so a lot of you. So you have citizenship?
I was born and raised there.
And so you're applying for who?
My wife. I got the refusal paper here.
So do you know what you're going to do now?
No.
عندنا أولادنا في أمريكا وأماتهم هنا موجودين. عندي 2 أولاد في الولايات المتحدة. أنا مجنس فهمت؟ بس أعطوني الرفض لأمهم أجي أعمل.
Most have spent tens of thousands of dollars waiting in Djibouti, where there's a high cost of living.
Spending fortunes and borrowing fortunes, and in the end, refusal. Where's the hope in that?
خسارتي أنا لما وصلت هنا أكثر من $20,000. لا عاد إحنا قاعدين نرجع اليمن. يعني الوسيلة دي كنت يعني أشقى على كان معي تاكسي دي كنت أشقى على أولادي فيها بعتها. ما عاد فيش. الآن نروح.
That's the question facing everyone here, as they grapple with how to keep their families united and figure out where their home is now.
How is this affecting your families?
Torn and broken down emotions. You know, we come here in signs of hope, and then they just tear that apart.
The moment this stay was lifted, all of these people received visa denials with a notice that they were also denied the waiver.
Diela Shames is an attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights, which has been working with Yemeni-American visa applicants who have received waiver rejections for their relatives. She says there's been little transparency from the administration about how waivers are actually granted.
There isn't like a formal application process that you would be subjected to undue hardship if you're denied, that it would be in the national interest to let you in and that you don't pose a threat to national security. But it's a bit of a shadow boxing exercise because you don't really know what it is you need to show to meet that criteria.
Did anyone here get a waiver?
Many of the families we met didn't even know that there was a waiver in the ban, largely because they began their application process years ago.
Were you aware of what the waiver process was?
No.
There are people who had gone through their interview process and filed all of their documents well before there was ever such a thing as a waiver. So they didn't even make a case for undue hardship. So on what basis were they being denied? It's like you're getting a rejection for something you didn't even ask for. And that seems particularly, Kafkaesque, that your application for a waiver has been denied and you've never even applied for one. These are US citizens and US lawful permanent residents who have a right to be reunited with their families.
One of the couples we met in Djibouti has been trying to start a life in the US for nearly 3 years.
Hi. How are you doing? Yeah, Sharif. Thanks for seeing us.
Guys, make yourself home.
Hi. What's your name? Amneya. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Mohammed first moved to New York in his early 20s. When he went back to Yemen a few years later, He and Aziza got married, and they had their daughter, Omneya. The war broke out when she was still a toddler.
الكل الآن بيدور طريق وبيدور كيف يخرج من اليمن عشان يستقر ويلاقي حياة مستقرة وآمنة. قصف ما بين فترة وفترة بيكون في ضرب وبنسمعها وبنحس بهزة الشباب كلنا. يعني مجرد ما تحس إنه في هزة بتعرف إنه في ضرب.
Mohammed became a citizen when he went back to the US, where he was working and most of his family lives, and started planning for Aziza and Omneya to join him.
So I started getting stuff for the house, furniture for the house. I was like planning, that's it. So we finally am gonna be with my family.
When they got to Djibouti, 5-year-old Omneya was given a visa, but her mother was still waiting for a decision.
My daughter and my wife, same case, same number. So they know they give my daughter a visa already. So I don't think so they're gonna give my wife reject.
But Aziza's interview took place before the ban went into effect, and it was unclear to her that she had to make a case for a waiver.
كنت متوقع يعني خلاص الأمور دام إنه كان حددوا موعد مقابلة وقلنا بنروح نقابل وكذا خلاص كانت الأمور كل شيء تمام. بس أجا قرار ترامب وقلب الموازين كلها، كل شيء انقلب رأساً على عقب.
So it says a waiver won't be granted in your case, taking into account the provisions of the proclamation. Did they give you any other reason? Did they explain why?
It was sort of like, buy, get your passport, buy, just wait, and just watch the news. They didn't even give you information from the embassy.
The family needs to make a decision about their future within days, because Mohammed and their daughter have to go to the US while she still has a visa. But then the question is, where will Aziza go?
يعني في لحظة أنت متوقع إنه خلاص حتبدأ تستقر بحياتك، حتترتب أمورك، تترتب حياتك، ما عاد فيش الأب لوحده والأم لوحدها، في كيان أسري كذا متكامل. الفترة هذه أنا بنحاول قدر المستطاع إن أنا أبعد بنتي على شوي مني، أخليها إنها ما بتدورش عليا، ما بتقولش ماما. صعب يعني انتظرت وعلى أمل إنك توصل للشيء وعلى أمل إنك خلاص في لحظة ولا حاجة.
The separation facing Mohammed and Aziza has been shared by too many families. Some in Djibouti, others having returned to Yemen, and their relatives in the US waiting, hoping they can be together soon. Before the war, Yemeni-Americans were able to travel relatively easily between their two home countries. That's the case for Abdul Fagih. He works in the US for an ATM company to support his family. We went to meet him at his apartment, just outside New York City, home to generations of Yemeni-Americans.
That's a wave of immigrants that came from our area in Yemen.
Abdul's family's roots in the US go back almost a century.
I'm a fourth generation here, fourth generation in the country. My father's grandfather from his mother's side is a citizen. My father is a citizen. All my uncles are citizens.
Abdul had hoped his children would continue that line too.
That's Safa, she's 21 years old. Muhammad is 17. Wala is 9. And this is my wife.
And your other son is how old?
19 years old. Al-Bara. He's not in this video.
He first applied for visas for his wife and 4 children in 2015, just after the war began. It marked the beginning of their first long separation, which lasted almost 3 years.
Without me being here supporting them, we wouldn't have a source of income to meet our life demands. It was the logic for me to come, but emotionally it was tougher than any time before.
The next time he would see them would be in Djibouti, when they left Yemen and traveled there for their visa interview.
We took the interview together. It was in January 29th. And in the interview, the little one, she was eligible for citizenship. She got it easy, but the rest of the family were rejected.
It's difficult to reconcile Abdo's family's history in America with the fact that his own children are now banned from coming here.
That wasn't the America that we thought about, that we dreamed to live in and to come to, and like to settle here and to pursue our lives here.
The day we met Abdo, the rest of his family had just left Djibouti. It was too expensive to stay there, so they went to Jordan, where they'll wait for the Supreme Court's decision.
It's going to be a life-changing decision after that. When you live here, you feel lonely, but you still have the hope that they're going to come, and it was just going to be a normal process to bring them. Since it gets that hard, and with the ban, you feel even lonelier than before. Your kids are on the other side of the globe. And it's very, very hard and tough.
Waiting for the Supreme Court ruling has come with steep costs for families. And for Najeeb, waiting in Djibouti eventually became impossible.
والبنت أينما جاء من وقت كانت حالتها تتدهور إلى أسوأ، من أسوأ إلى أسوأ. نقلناها إلى المستشفى في جيبوتي، ما أعطوا لها أي اهتمام.
With treatment unavailable for Shaima in Djibouti, Najeeb told us he didn't know what to do, but go back to Yemen, where he sent us these messages.
والحالة وحالة شيماء غير مستقرة. اليوم في تحسن، غدا في مرض. وعلاجها في اليمن علاج حالات للحالات الطارئة فقط. فأنا أصبحت في حيرة، محتار جدا جدا، ما أعرف إيش أسوي الآن والله.
The families we met during our reporting, like Najeeb and his family, seemed like they met the criteria for a waiver under the ban.
But one of the things that we're really sort of scratching our heads about is the sort of undue hardship requirement and how we can show that. Many of the people, as you can imagine, leaving countries like Yemen would suffer undue hardship if they're not able to rejoin their families in the US.
The families we met also seemed like they meet the criteria, particularly because they're American citizens. And in Najeeb's case, his daughter Shaima needs critical medical care, both of which are listed as qualifications to be considered for a waiver.
So who's deciding who gets a waiver?
The US government official position is that it's a consular officer's discretionary decision. But if you put yourself in a position of a consular officer and you're sort of told, and the rhetoric around at the administration is sort of an overall ban and these people from these countries are essentially undesirable, you're going to have a much harder look to decide whether or not someone should be eligible for a waiver.
According to State Department data sent to Congress, in the month after the ban went into effect, 8,400 applications from the targeted countries were processed, but only 2 waivers were approved. The State Department declined our request to interview officials in Djibouti or Washington, but told us that in the 4-month period leading up to the Supreme Court arguments, 460 waivers were granted, but they refused to say out of how many applications.
By claiming that there is a robust waiver process through which you can seek a waiver, it sort of takes away some of the harm. It's a bit more of a sugarcoating of what is an outright ban. And then that sugarcoating disappears if you actually look at what's happening on the ground and you see that the waiver process is only there in name but not in practice.
Let's just take, for example, Mr. Al-Amari, the 10-year-old.
In late April, on the last day of their term, the Supreme Court heard arguments in the challenge to the travel ban.
This waiver process has excluded, and you have...
Justices focused on the waivers and why so few people were being granted them. And out of thousands of cases, just 1 was brought up by name.
A 10-year-old with cerebral palsy who wants to come to the United States to save her life, and she can't move or talk. The 10-year-old was denied a waiver, Justice Breyer.
Were you surprised when you found out that your case was mentioned at the Supreme Court?
كنا منتظرين اليوم هذا الذي فيه المحكمات هو كان يوم المرافعات. بس ما كنت متوقع إنها بتكون قصة شيماء إنها بالمحكمة بتذكر.
Just a day after the Supreme Court arguments, Najeeb received an email from the US Embassy in Djibouti. Okay, so this is the email you got from the embassy. Dear Mr. Al-Amari, during your family's immigrant visa interview at the US Embassy, the severity of Shaima's cerebral palsy had not only been independently verified by our panel physician, but also very apparent to me. To Najeeb's surprise, the embassy official told him they were now approved for waivers. Had you heard from the US consulate in Djibouti at all between when you were first rejected for the waiver, and when you got the approval in April?
ولا في أي تفاصيل.
The embassy official claimed he had always been approved, but they couldn't tell him. In the meantime, Najeeb and his family spent thousands of dollars in Djibouti and traveled back to Yemen. After the email, he had to wait for further instructions, and eventually got a call from the embassy telling him they had 2 weeks to get to the US. From Yemen, they rushed to Djibouti to get their visas, and then were finally able to come to the US, where we met up with them again.
لما أخذت الفيز يعني والهذا أنا يعني طاير من الفرحة يعني.
The family settled in a small town in California. Shaima is now receiving proper medical care.
والله وضع شيماء تحسن كثير يعني حالتها النفسية مرتاحة. لازم أطرحها بالشمس قليل، لازم أوديها المسبح، لازم أوديها يعني لازم تمشي معي يعني. فذلك هي مستقرة، نفسيتها مستقرة.
تضحك. Do you think that getting this waiver may have saved her life?
طبعا أكيد إنه هو سيف حياتنا كلنا، مش لحياة شيماء يعني، حياتنا كلنا، لأنه حياتنا هي مرتبطة بشيماء يعني، إحنا ما نستطيع نتركها.
2 months after hearing arguments over the policy, the Supreme Court issued their ruling. The travel ban was upheld. What do you think about the Supreme Court's actual ruling on the ban?
والله صراحة كانت نكسة، تعتبر القرار هي تعتبر نكسة في يعني وصمة عار يعني صراحة، وهم يعني أمريكيين يعني، إحنا نتكلم عن أمريكيين يعني عندهم الجوازات كأي مواطن أمريكي ورفضوا. يعني وممكن أبوه متجنس أمريكي، مش هو أمريكي، من أبوه أمريكي، أبوه وهو أمريكي وما استطاعش إنه يمكن يجيب ابنه أو زوجته، يعني هذا قرار ظالم.
Najeeb and his family seem to be an exception, with thousands of others left to face the reality of the court's decision.
خلنا نشوف ماما فين. هذه هو المشكلة.
We met up with Mohammed and his daughter Omneya in Brooklyn. They traveled here shortly after we met them in Djibouti to live with the rest of his family.
ماما كيف أنت يا ماما؟ تمام الحمد لله، كيفك؟ الحمد لله.
They decided that Aziza would go to Jordan, where Mohammed's older brother lives.
يعني أنا في منطقة بعيدة وغريبة فيها، وعلى الأقل أنت لما تكون في بلاد غربة بتكون فيها مع عائلتك الصغيرة اللي هي مكونة من أب وأم وطفلة.
Their hope is that Omneya can get her passport or a green card soon, so she can join her mother in Jordan, while Mohammed works in New York. But it still means their family will be separated.
She leave a little bit of time with her mother, a little bit of time with her dad. It's not good for her. It's not good for her like personality. Like 3-4 months with her mother, 3-4 months with her father. That's it's gonna be like 2 persons. كيف أخبارك عزيزة؟
وحشتيني كثير. وأنتِ وحشتيني كثير، وحشتيني أكثر.
I love this country. That's like my country. I love it, and I'm loyal to it. And that's what I need to plant it inside my daughter, like to love this country. But if she tell me what is my mother like, you know, she gonna grow up one day. It's like, what happened that time? What am I gonna tell her? America take away your mom from you? She needs her mother. Because everybody have kids, have wives. So you know how it is. It's like we're not different. we all the same feeling, same everything. So feel it.
طيب نهرب نجري أنا وأنتي وبابا وعم نسين والجدعاية.
إن شاء الله يا أمي.
إحنا بنراعي لكم.
يلا يجيش الخير.
طيب.
مع السلامة.
With the court's ruling, their future now will be defined by their separation, a home split in two.
كم بقدر أتحمل والله مش عارفة، بس يعني إيش الذنب اللي إحنا أذنبناه عشان يفصلوا بنت عن أمها؟ إيش الغلط؟